The sound that shattered the sacred silence of St. Catherine's Academy wasn't a prayer or a whisper of reverence. It was laughter, sharp, mocking, and so loud it echoed off the marble walls like a slap across the face of faith itself. 15-year-old Maya Santos stood before the centuries-old statue of the Virgin Mary, her dark eyes sparkling with defiance as her cruel laughter filled the hallway where generations of students had knelt in prayer. "You actually believe this piece of stone can hear you?" Maya's voice dripped with contempt as she gestured toward the serene face of the Virgin Mary. The statue, carved from white marble and standing in an alcove surrounded by flickering votive candles, had been the spiritual heart of the school for over 100 years. Students passing by stopped in horror, crossing themselves as Maya continued her mockery. "It's just rock, carved by some old man centuries ago. Wake up!" Sister Margaret, who had taught at St. Catherine's for 30 years, appeared at the end of the hallway just as Maya delivered her final insult. The elderly nun's face went ashen as she witnessed something she had never seen in decades of service: a student openly ridiculing the Mother of God in the sacred halls of their school. Before we go deeper into this mystery, take a moment to subscribe to Virgin Mary Mysteries. Stories like this are too powerful to experience alone. And please, let me know where you're watching from today. And share a prayer for Maya by writing "Mother of Mercy, guide her" in the comments below. I want to see how far our faith community reaches across the world. But Maya wasn't finished. As her classmates whispered prayers and backed away, she reached toward the statue's base, where students traditionally left small offerings and prayer requests. "Watch this," she announced, her voice filled with teenage bravado that would soon be replaced by something else entirely. She grabbed a handful of the handwritten prayer notes left by desperate students, pleas for healing, for family reconciliation, for hope, and let them flutter to the ground like worthless confetti. What happened next would be the first sign that Maya Santos had just challenged something far greater than a piece of marble. The candles around the statue, which had burned steadily for hours, suddenly flickered as if touched by an invisible wind. The temperature in the hallway dropped noticeably, and several students later swore they caught the faintest scent of roses. Impossible, since it was November and no flowers bloomed anywhere on the school grounds. Maya felt it too. A chill that had nothing to do with the weather ran down her spine as she stared into the statue's gentle eyes. For just a moment, her confident smirk faltered. But teenage pride is a powerful force, and she pushed the feeling away, turning her back on the statue with a dismissive shrug. "See? Nothing happened," she announced to her stunned audience. "Just superstition and wishful thinking." Sister Margaret approached slowly, her rosary beads clicking softly in her trembling hands as she knelt to gather the scattered prayer requests. As she touched each crumpled note, she whispered a prayer for the soul of the girl who had just committed such sacrilege. But what the nun couldn't know, what none of them could know, was that Maya Santos had exactly 5 hours before the first miracle would occur. And when it did, the very ground she stood on would become sacred in a way that would silence her mockery forever. Maya Santos had learned to harden her heart early. At 15, she carried herself with the defiant swagger of someone who had been disappointed too many times to believe in fairy tales or miracles. Her scholarship to St. Catherine's Academy was supposed to be her escape route from the cramped apartment she shared with her grandmother Rosa in East Denver, but instead it had become another battlefield where her anger found new targets. The apartment above Martinez grocery store smelled perpetually of garlic and old wood, sounds of the neighborhood filtering through thin walls. Rosa Santos worked double shifts at the hospital laundry, her arthritis-gnarled fingers spending 12 hours a day folding sheets and towels for patients she would never meet. At 68, she moved like a woman 20 years older. The weight of raising a rebellious granddaughter and worrying about her absent daughter pressing down on her shoulders like stones. Every evening, without fail, Rosa knelt before a small shrine she had created in the corner of their living room. The centerpiece was a statue of the Virgin Mary, nearly identical to the one Maya had just mocked at school. This one was smaller, purchased years ago from a church rummage sale, but Rosa had surrounded it with white candles, plastic flowers, and dozens of prayer cards accumulated over decades of desperate faith. Maya would watch from her bedroom door as her grandmother's lips moved in silent prayer, her worn rosary beads sliding through fingers that trembled from exhaustion. Rosa prayed for Maya's mother Carmen, who had abandoned them 3 years ago to chase promises in California that never materialized. She prayed for Maya's anger to soften, for her scholarship to last, for enough money to keep the lights on. Most of all, she prayed for patience. Patience with a granddaughter who seemed determined to reject everything Rosa held sacred. "Mija," Rosa would whisper after her prayers, her voice carrying across the small apartment. "Come say goodnight to La Virgencita," but Maya would retreat to her room, slamming the door with just enough force to make her point. The statue couldn't hear. The prayers were wasted breath. Hope was a luxury they couldn't afford. What Maya didn't know was that Rosa had been praying specifically for her granddaughter's heart to open. For months, she had knelt before that statue asking the Virgin Mary to find a way to reach the angry girl who was so much like her own daughter had been. Rosa believed with the fierce faith of someone who had survived poverty, abandonment, and heartbreak that prayers were never wasted, even when they seemed to fall on deaf ears. Tonight, Rosa would kneel again, but her prayers would carry new urgency. Because at 3:47 p.m., exactly 5 hours after Maya's mockery at school, something would happen that would force even the most stubborn heart to reconsider what was possible. And Rosa's worn statue of the Virgin Mary, surrounded by flickering candles in their small apartment, would become the first place Maya would run when the impossible began to unfold. At 3:47 p.m., Maya Santos was walking toward the main entrance of St. Catherine's Academy when something impossible happened. She had just finished detention with Sister Margaret, punishment for her morning blasphemy, and her mind was still burning with resentment. The hallway stretched before her, empty except for the afternoon sunlight streaming through stained glass windows, casting colored shadows across the polished floor. As she approached the Virgin Mary statue, Maya felt a strange pull she couldn't explain. Not guilt, not remorse, but something deeper, an inexplicable urge to stop walking straight and veer left toward the library entrance instead. She tried to resist it, her jaw clenching with stubborn determination to walk her usual path directly past the statue she had mocked hours earlier. But the feeling grew stronger. Her footsteps slowed, and without understanding why, she found herself stepping sideways, away from her intended route. The compulsion was so powerful it felt almost physical, as if invisible hands were gently guiding her toward the library door. Maya shook her head, annoyed at her own weakness, but continued the unexpected detour. 3 seconds later, the massive crystal chandelier that had hung above the main hallway for 70 years came crashing down. The sound was deafening, a thunderous explosion of glass and twisted metal that sent shards flying across the marble floor like deadly diamonds. The chandelier struck the exact spot where Maya would have been walking if she had continued straight. The impact was so violent, it cracked the floor tiles and embedded pieces of crystal into the opposite wall. Maya stood frozen, her heart hammering against her ribs as she stared at the destruction. Students came running from every direction, their screams echoing off the walls as they saw the devastation. Sister Margaret appeared within moments, her face white with shock as she surveyed the wreckage. "Maya!" The nun rushed toward her, hands trembling as she reached for the girl's shoulders. "Are you hurt? Were you—" Sister Margaret's words died as she realized the truth. Maya should have been directly under that chandelier when it fell. By every law of timing and routine, she should have been crushed beneath tons of crystal and metal. If this story is pulling you in, subscribe now and tell me in the comments what you believe is really happening. Your insight might reveal something we haven't seen yet. Other students gathered around, their voices hushed with awe and terror. "She was walking straight toward it," whispered Jennifer Murphy, who had been watching from the classroom doorway. "I saw her change direction for no reason." Another student crossed herself, staring at the Virgin Mary statue that stood untouched in its alcove, candles still burning serenely despite the chaos surrounding it. Maya's legs felt weak as the reality sank in. She looked toward the statue, and for a moment she could have sworn the marble face seemed different, not changed, but somehow more present, more aware. The gentle eyes that she had mocked that morning now seemed to hold a knowledge that made her stomach twist with something she refused to call fear. But this was only the beginning, because as Maya would discover within hours, the Virgin Mary was far from finished with her. Maya spent the entire evening trying to convince herself that the chandelier incident was nothing more than a bizarre coincidence. She sat at the kitchen table, aggressively scribbling through her homework while her grandmother Rosa prepared dinner, the familiar sounds of sizzling onions and clinking dishes providing a comforting backdrop to her turbulent thoughts. "How was school, Mija?" Rosa asked, her voice carrying the gentle concern that always made Maya's defenses crack slightly. The older woman moved slowly around their small kitchen, her movements careful and deliberate as she managed the evening routine that had become sacred between them. "Fine," Maya muttered, not looking up from her algebra problems. She couldn't tell Rosa about the mockery, the detention, or the terrifying moment when tons of crystal nearly crushed her. Rosa's faith was already unshakable. Maya refused to give her ammunition for more prayers and novenas. After dinner, Rosa retrieved her weekly pill organizer from the cabinet, the same routine Maya had watched countless times, 7 compartments for 7 days, each carefully filled with the medications that kept Rosa's diabetes and heart condition under control. But tonight, as Rosa opened Wednesday's compartment, Maya felt that same inexplicable pull she had experienced at school, a sudden, overwhelming urge to pay attention. "Abuela, wait," Maya heard herself saying, though she had no idea why. Rosa paused, the pills halfway to her mouth. Looking at her granddaughter with surprise, Maya stared at the medications in Rosa's palm, her mind racing without clear direction. Something was wrong, but she couldn't identify what. "Let me see the bottles," Maya said urgently, standing up so quickly her chair scraped against the linoleum floor. Rosa frowned but handed over the pharmacy bag from that morning's pickup. Maya examined each prescription bottle with intensity she couldn't explain, reading labels she had never paid attention to before, and then she found it. The blood pressure medication bottle bore Rosa's name, but the pills inside were wrong. Smaller, different color, completely different medication. Maya's hands began to tremble as she read the fine print. These were powerful heart rhythm pills meant for someone else, medication that could have stopped Rosa's heart within hours if taken with her diabetes medication. "Dios mío," Rosa whispered as Maya explained the error, her weathered hands pressing against her chest. They rushed to the emergency room, where doctors confirmed Maya's discovery. The pharmacist had made a potentially fatal mistake, one that should have been caught by multiple safety systems, but somehow slipped through every checkpoint. "How did you know to look?" Dr. Ramirez asked Maya as they waited for Rosa's tests to be completed. Maya stared at her hands, unable to answer. How could she explain that something had compelled her to examine pills she had never cared about before? How could she admit that twice in one day an inexplicable force had protected someone she loved? That night, as Rosa knelt before her shrine and whispered prayers of gratitude, Maya stood in her doorway watching. The candles flickered gently around the small Virgin Mary statue, and Maya felt something crack inside her chest, not her skepticism, not yet, but something deeper, a recognition she wasn't ready to name. But tomorrow would bring the third sign, and this time, Maya's denial would become impossible to maintain. Thursday morning arrived grey and stormy, matching Maya's troubled mood as she walked through the halls of St. Catherine's Academy. Word about the chandelier incident had spread through the school like wildfire, and students whispered as she passed, their eyes following her with a mixture of awe and curiosity that made her skin crawl. She had saved her grandmother's life less than 12 hours ago, and now these same classmates who had witnessed her mockery were treating her like some kind of reluctant prophet. During lunch, Maya found herself sitting alone in the cafeteria, picking at her sandwich, while rain drummed against the windows. She was trying to focus on her biology textbook when that familiar sensation washed over her again, the same inexplicable urgency that had saved her from the chandelier and protected Rosa from the wrong medication. But this time, the feeling was different, stronger, more insistent, and it was pulling her attention towards someone outside the school grounds. Maya's hands began to tremble as an image formed in her mind with startling clarity. Mrs. Chen, the elderly woman who lived next to Rosa's apartment building. The quiet lady who always smiled when they passed on the stairs, who fed stray cats and kept her small balcony garden meticulously maintained. Maya tried to dismiss the vision, but it intensified. She could see Mrs. Chen collapsed on her kitchen floor, one hand reaching toward a phone she couldn't quite grasp. The image was so vivid, so urgent, that Maya found herself standing up from the lunch table without conscious decision. "I have to go," she whispered to no one, grabbing her backpack and rushing toward the main office. She invented a story about Rosa needing her at home, lying with surprising ease to the secretary who signed her early dismissal slip. Maya ran the 8 blocks to their neighborhood, her heart pounding with each step. She burst into the apartment building and climbed the stairs 2 at a time, stopping outside Mrs. Chen's door. She listened intently, hearing nothing but silence. Maya knocked gently, then more urgently when no answer came. "Mrs. Chen! It's Maya from next door." Still nothing. Maya's panic intensified as she remembered Rosa mentioning that Mrs. Chen always kept a spare key under the small plant outside her door, a detail that had meant nothing until this moment. Maya found the key and unlocked the door, calling out as she entered the neat apartment. She found Mrs. Chen exactly as she had envisioned, collapsed beside her kitchen table, conscious but unable to move, her medication for diabetes scattered across the floor where it had fallen from her shaking hands. "Don't try to talk," Maya said, already dialing 911 while kneeling beside the woman. "Help is coming." Mrs. Chen's eyes filled with gratitude and confusion as paramedics arrived within minutes, stabilizing her blood sugar levels that had dropped to dangerously low numbers. At the hospital, Dr. Martinez explained that Mrs. Chen would have slipped into a diabetic coma within the hour if Maya hadn't found her. "How did you know to check on her?" the doctor asked, echoing the question that was haunting Maya's every waking moment. That night, Maya stood before Rosa's shrine longer than ever before, staring at the Virgin Mary statue with eyes that burned with unshed tears. 3 miracles in 2 days. And tomorrow would bring a test that would force Maya to choose between her stubborn pride and the impossible truth standing before her. Friday evening brought an unexpected silence to the Santos apartment. Rosa had returned early from her hospital shift, claiming exhaustion, but Maya noticed something different in her grandmother's movements, a slowness that seemed deeper than usual fatigue. Rosa sat heavily in her favorite chair, one hand pressed against her chest in a gesture that made Maya's newly awakened intuition prickle with concern. "Are you feeling all right, Abuela?" Maya asked, looking up from her homework. She was surprised by the tenderness in her own voice, by how much she had changed in just 3 days. "Just tired, mija," Rosa replied, but her breathing seemed labored. Too many years of working too hard. She smiled, but Maya caught the flicker of worry that crossed her weathered face. At 8:23 p.m., their ancient phone rang with a sound that cut through the evening quiet like a blade. Maya and Rosa both froze. No one called them at night unless something was wrong. Rosa struggled to stand, but Maya was already moving toward the kitchen where their old rotary phone sat on the counter. "Hello, Odus." Maya's voice was cautious, braced for bad news. Maya? The voice on the other end was hesitant, trembling with emotion Maya recognized but had tried to forget. It's your mother." The world tilted. Maya gripped the phone receiver so tightly her knuckles went white. Carmen, her mother, who had walked out 3 years ago promising to return when she got her life together. The woman who had broken Rosa's heart and abandoned her daughter for dreams that never materialized. "I know I have no right to call," Carmen continued, her words rushing together. "But I've been thinking about you and Mama Rosa every day for months. I've been clean for 8 months now, and I got a job, and I had this overwhelming feeling tonight that I needed to call. That something was happening and I needed to be there." Maya felt tears burning her eyes as she looked toward Rosa, who had managed to stand and was watching with hands pressed to her heart. The old woman's face had gone pale, hope and fear warring in her expression. "Where are you?" Maya whispered. "Phoenix, but I can drive through the night. I can be there by tomorrow afternoon if you'll let me come home." Maya closed her eyes, feeling that same inexplicable pull that had saved her from the chandelier, protected Rosa from the wrong medication, and led her to Mrs. Chen. But this time, the feeling wasn't urgent. It was gentle, warm, like being wrapped in something soft and protective. "Yes," Maya heard herself saying. "Come home, Mom." Rosa began to cry, deep, silent tears that spoke of 3 years of praying for this moment. But as Maya hung up the phone and embraced her grandmother, she felt something troubling in Rosa's trembling embrace. A weakness that went beyond emotion. Tomorrow would bring the reunion Rosa had prayed for every night, but it would also reveal why the Virgin Mary had orchestrated this moment of healing with such perfect timing. Saturday afternoon, Maya Santos arrived looking older than her 35 years, but with eyes that held a clarity Maya barely remembered. The reunion was tentative at first. 3 years of abandonment couldn't be erased with a single embrace. But Rosa's joy was so pure, so complete, that it seemed to fill their small apartment with light. Maya watched her grandmother fuss over Carmen with renewed energy, preparing her daughter's favorite meal, despite the tremor in her hands that had grown more pronounced throughout the morning. Carmen helped in the kitchen, their conversation careful but genuine, as they rebuilt bridges that had been burned years ago. It was during dinner, as Carmen shared stories of her recovery and Rosa glowed with pride, that Maya felt it again, the pull. But this time it was different, not urgent, not protective, but devastatingly sad. Maya looked at her grandmother, really looked at her, and saw what she had been trying to ignore. The grey pallor beneath Rosa's makeup, the way she pressed her hand to her chest between sentences, the shortness of breath disguised as laughter. At 7:15 p.m., Rosa excused herself to light the evening candles at her shrine, as she had done every night for decades. Maya and Carmen were washing dishes when they heard the soft thud from the living room, a sound so quiet it might have been missed if Maya's newfound awareness hadn't been tuned to every nuance of Rosa's movements. They found Rosa collapsed beside her shrine, her rosary beads scattered across the floor, and her breathing shallow and irregular. Her eyes were open but unfocused, one hand still reaching toward the Virgin Mary statue as if seeking comfort. "Call 911!" Maya screamed, dropping to her knees beside her grandmother while Carmen fumbled for the phone. But even as the paramedics rushed Rosa to the hospital, Maya knew this was different. This wasn't something that could be fixed with the right medication or a timely rescue. In the hospital waiting room, Carmen held Maya's hand while they waited for news. Hours passed like centuries until Dr. Ramirez emerged with the expression Maya had been dreading. "It's her heart," he explained gently. "Massive damage that's been building for months. She's been hiding the symptoms, probably didn't want to worry anyone. At her age, with this level of deterioration." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "You should be prepared. The next few hours will be critical." Maya felt her world cracking apart. All the miracles, all the protection, and she couldn't save the person who mattered most. In desperation, she did something that would have been impossible just a week ago. She knelt on the cold hospital floor and prayed. "Please," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I'm sorry I mocked you. I'm sorry I didn't believe. But don't take her from us. Not now when she's finally happy again." And in that moment of complete surrender, the final miracle began. At 3:33 a.m., Dr. Ramirez emerged from Rosa's room with an expression of bewilderment that had replaced his earlier grim certainty. Maya and Carmen, who had been holding vigil in the hallway, stood up slowly, braced for the worst news of their lives. "I need to show you something," the doctor said quietly, leading them to the monitors displaying Rosa's vital signs. "4 hours ago, your grandmother's heart was functioning at less than 20% capacity. The damage was extensive and irreversible." He paused, studying the readouts as if they contained a language he couldn't quite translate. "Her heart function has improved to 60%. That's not medically possible with the level of damage we documented." Maya felt her knees weaken. She's stable, more than stable. She's showing signs of recovery that I've never seen in 40 years of cardiology. We're running more tests, but the improvement is undeniable." Dr. Ramirez looked directly at Maya, something like reverence in his tired eyes. "Whatever you prayed for in that waiting room, someone was listening." Rosa remained unconscious for 2 more days, but her recovery continued to defy medical explanation. When she finally opened her eyes on Monday morning, her first words were for Maya. "Mija, I had the most beautiful dream. La Virgencita was holding my hand, telling me my work here wasn't finished yet." Word of Rosa's miraculous recovery spread quickly through their neighborhood and then through St. Catherine's Academy when Maya returned to school on Wednesday. The girl who had mocked the Virgin Mary statue just 1 week earlier now walked the hallways with a quiet dignity that her teachers barely recognized. Sister Margaret watched in amazement as Maya stopped before the statue each morning, not with the theatrical devotion of someone seeking attention, but with the simple reverence of a heart that had been transformed. Maya would place fresh flowers at the base of the statue, kneel for a moment of silent prayer, and then continue to her classes without fanfare. Her classmates noticed the change too. Maya's sharp edges had softened, her anger replaced by a gentle strength that made her more approachable than she had ever been. When Jennifer Murphy asked her directly what had happened during those miraculous 5 days, Maya simply smiled and said, "Sometimes we have to lose everything we think we know before we can find what's actually true." Carmen found a job at a local clinic and moved back into Rosa's apartment, the family finally whole again. She would often find Maya sitting quietly beside Rosa's shrine in the evenings, not necessarily praying, but simply present, as if she had found a peace that had eluded her for years. Rosa returned to work part-time, her health monitored closely but stable in ways that continued to puzzle her doctors. Every evening, she knelt before her shrine as she always had, but now Maya often joined her. 2 generations united in gratitude for grace they couldn't fully understand, but no longer questioned. But mysteries remained. How had a teenage girl's mockery been transformed into a week of miracles? Why had the Virgin Mary chosen Maya, of all people, to become an instrument of protection and healing? The answers would come in the quiet moments that followed, as Maya discovered her true purpose in the sacred space between doubt and faith. 6 months later, Maya Santos could be found every morning before first period, kneeling before the Virgin Mary statue in the hallway of St. Catherine's Academy, not in penance for her past mockery, but in gratitude for a transformation that continued to unfold in ways both subtle and profound. The fresh flowers she brought each day, white roses when she could afford them, simple daisies from the corner market when money was tight, had become a beloved tradition throughout the school. Other students began leaving their own small offerings, handwritten prayer requests, photographs of sick relatives, tiny medals and crucifixes that caught the candlelight like promises whispered in the dark. Sister Margaret often paused to watch Maya during these morning devotions, marveling at the peace that seemed to radiate from the girl who had once filled these sacred halls with bitter laughter. The transformation wasn't dramatic or showy. Maya hadn't become a mystic or a visionary. Instead, she had become something perhaps more miraculous, a teenage girl who carried hope. Maya's grades improved steadily as her anger dissolved, replaced by a quiet focus that impressed her teachers. She began tutoring younger students who struggled with math and science, offering patience that seemed to flow from some inexhaustible well within her. When classmates faced family crises or personal struggles, they found themselves drawn to Maya, not because she offered easy answers, but because she listened with the depth of someone who had learned that miracles often wear the ordinary clothes of human kindness. Rose's health remained stable, defying every medical prediction. She returned to full-time work with energy that amazed her doctors and co-workers, her recovery becoming a source of hope for other patients facing similar diagnoses. Carmen thrived in her new job, her sobriety strengthened by the daily miracle of her restored family. But perhaps the most profound change was in the Santos apartment itself. The small shrine in the corner had become the heart of their home, a place where 3 generations of women gathered each evening, not just to pray, but to share the events of their days, their hopes for tomorrow, their gratitude for second chances none of them had expected to receive. Maya often thought about that morning when her cruel laughter had echoed off these sacred walls, trying to understand how 1 week could contain so much transformation. 5 miracles had saved lives, healed relationships, and opened hearts that had been locked tight by pain and disappointment. If this story moved you, subscribe to Virgin Mary Mysteries so you never miss the next chapter in these extraordinary mysteries. In quiet moments, when Maya knelt before the statue that had witnessed her mockery and her surrender, she sometimes caught that same faint scent of roses that had marked the beginning of her transformation. Not as a sign or a message, but as a gentle reminder that love was always present. Even when pride made it impossible to see, the Virgin Mary statue still stands in the hallway of St. Catherine's Academy, surrounded by flowers and flickering candles. Students still whisper prayers and leave their written hopes at her feet. And every morning, a girl who once laughed at faith now kneels in reverence before the mystery that transformed her mockery into a miracle. If Maya's transformation touched your heart, write "Heart of Stone" in the comments below, because sometimes that's exactly what needs to be softened before grace can enter. I want to see how many hearts this story has reached across our faithful community.